The Cold War, a term that evokes a myriad of images, nuclear armaments glimmering ominously beneath the shadow of the mushroom cloud, covert agents disappearing into the chaos of Cold War Berlin, and a globe divided starkly along ideological lines. But what does it mean, truly, to engage in such a monumental standoff between two superpowers? At its core, it represents a clash not merely of territories but of ideologies, capitalism versus communism, each believing fiercely in its own superiority. As we delve deep into this period, you'll discover not only the historical events that defined an era but the espionage that shaped the power dynamics of nations. Stick around, because what you're about to uncover will challenge everything you thought you knew about this complex struggle. Imagine waking up every day knowing your very survival could hinge on a single political maneuver half a world away. This was the reality during the Cold War, where citizens locked in the throes of fear, paranoia, and the unknown operated under the constant specter of an all-out nuclear war. The stakes were terrifyingly high, and it's during this time that espionage emerged like a shadowy underbelly, where the unseen moved behind the curtains of power to tip the balance ever so slightly in favor of the superpowers. You might be wondering, what shocking capabilities did spies cultivate in this war of whispers? How did they foster a climate rife with mistrust and uncertainty? Let's travel back to the dawn of this conflict in the late 1940s. The world was still shaking from the aftershocks of World War II, and nations were struggling to adapt to a new world order. The United States emerged as a bastion of capitalism and democracy, while the Soviet Union took its place as the harbinger of communism, determined to spread its ideology globally. Here came the first touch of espionage, with both sides acutely aware that knowledge wasn't just power, it was survival itself. The US and the USSR engaged in an intricate game of cat and mouse, where every piece of intelligence could bolster one side or dismantle the other. Picture a young man, fresh from an Ivy League university, navigating the clandestine streets of Moscow, shoulders hunched against the chill of that city only recently shaken by revolution. He was an agent in the KGB, the secret police of the Soviet Union, tasked with surveilling citizens and hunting down traitors, yet in an extraordinary twist of fate, he became a double agent, flipping allegiances to play for Team America. The extraordinary story of such characters revealed that the nature of espionage was not just about secrets but the depths of human deception and allegiance. Here's something you didn't expect: intelligence professionals, spanning both sides, often found themselves more embroiled in the moral ambiguities of betrayal than in simple acts of patriotism. When we think of the Cold War, we typically envision grand strategies and military might, yet the conflicts were often waged in quiet rooms filled with smoke, amid the soft tap of secrets being traded over cocktails. Take for instance the Berlin Wall. Not only was this concrete barrier a literal division of East and West, but it served as the front line of espionage. Secrets hid behind the very bricks, with spies threading their way through the cracks, eyes open for any hint of political unrest or defection, changing the tides of power and public opinion. Did you know that the Berlin Wall wasn't just a physical barrier but also a psychological one? It constantly reminded the world that freedom was confined and communism reigned supreme behind iron curtains. Meanwhile, the CIA was entrenched in operations that read like thrillers: the overthrow of foreign governments, the creation of fake narratives, the spread of disinformation. One particularly audacious operation was the overthrow of Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh in 1953, a move that established a lasting narrative of Western influence and distrust in the region. You may be surprised to learn that many of the tactics utilized during this time were not purely military. They included sophisticated psychological strategies that influenced public perception and manipulated the masses. the psychological dimension of the Cold War opens a treasure trove of revelations that may have gone unnoticed in historical accounts. Espionage penetrated deeper, too, with inventions and methods that blurred the lines between science fiction and reality. The era birthed sophisticated spy gadgets ranging from cameras hidden in pens to elaborate surveillance techniques that monitored conversations and gathered intelligence. Yet incredible as these advancements were, they also echoed the fragility of civil liberty. You may be wondering how these tactics transcended the borders of nations and seeped into everyday life. It's shocking to realize that in pursuing national security, civil freedoms often became a collateral damage amid the paranoia. Americans grew cautious of their neighbors, while Soviets eyed each other with suspicion, the essence of trust shattered at a societal level. As we progress, it's essential to acknowledge the strategic role of media within this web of espionage and ideology. Propaganda became the lifeblood for garnering public sentiment, each side creating narratives that painted the other as an existential threat. Advertisements, films, and even cartoons were employed to depict enemy ideologies in the most unfavorable and cartoonishly villainous lights. Can you recall classic films from that time? Edifying polarizations were sharpened by the cinematic scissors, Americans portrayed as virtuous defenders of freedom while Soviets were depicted as looming monsters who thrived on oppression. And let's not forget the clandestine operations that took place under the radar of routine life. The Cuban Missile Crisis, for instance, ignited a 13-day standoff and brought the world perilously close to nuclear annihilation. The tension that simmered in these days was heightened by real-time intelligence reports from U-2 reconnaissance planes that captured images of Soviet missile installations on Cuban soil. Each photograph was a ticking clock, raising the stakes exponentially. What comes next will leave you speechless. This moment crystallized the realization that espionage was more than a mere battle of secrets. It was a high-stakes chess game, with each player acutely aware that one wrong move could alter the course of humanity. And then there were the spies themselves, who became larger-than-life figures enshrined in myth almost as much as history. Consider the likes of Kim Philby, a name that became synonymous with double agents. Philby infiltrated the highest echelons of British intelligence while working for the Soviets, showcasing the level of espionage that transcended mere loyalty to nationhood. His story begs the question, how many other such figures lurked in the shadows, eluding even the most sophisticated surveillance mechanisms? You may be astonished to find that espionage wasn't just limited to professionals. Everyday people were swept into this grand narrative as informants, defectors, and idealists who wrestled with their own beliefs. However, all these tactics, whether tense or thrilling, brought unforeseen consequences. With time, people began recognizing the human toll that espionage exacted. The rivalry bred a lonely malaise, leaving many disillusioned and battling their own existential crises. The specter of bomb shelters loomed large in families across America. You might think, how did this psychological warfare impact the populace's view of freedom? Over time, the very ideologies that fomented the conflict began to offer glimpses of their fragility. The idealism of communism began to falter under its oppressive weight while capitalism struggled against its tendencies for inequity. As we descend upon the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, a monumental event marking the collapse of divided ideologies, it's crucial to recognize the lessons left behind by the espionage tactics that once ruled the day. The Cold War, with its complex layers of secrecy, paranoia, and human ambition, provides striking insights into the landscapes of power and distrust. Every secret faded into the kaleidoscope of history, leaving us with questions that provoke deep reflection. What if intelligence had been shared instead of hoarded? What if cooperation had prevailed over competition? Now, As we near the end of this journey, let's ponder the emerging relevance of these lessons today. The ideological divides may shift and evolve, but the essence of power, shrouded in secrecy, espionage, and the allure of the other, remains omnipresent. Today's nation-states wield similar tactics under the veils of cybersecurity, misinformation, and social media manipulation, echoing patterns past that remain useful in understanding our present. So, as you step away from this exploration, reflect on the captivating highs and alarming lows of the Cold War's clash of ideologies and the unseen battles fought in shadows. Ultimately, the Cold War wasn't just a nasty chapter in history, it was a reminder of humanity's capacity to create and destroy in equal measure, a dance as old as civilization itself. The stories of spies, strategies, and ideological fervor might seem distant, yet they ripple through the present like ghosts, challenging our perceptions and ensuring that history's lessons are never forgotten. So, what will you take away from this complex narrative? How will you redefine the beliefs you hold about trust, secrecy, and the fight for ideologies as we tread into the uncertain future on this shared planet? Each question, like the Cold War itself, echoes an enduring story worth pursuing, questioning, and understanding more fully. The past beckons. Will you answer?